For decades, three murders in and around Toronto were treated as separate cases. Different years, different locations, different victims. At the time, investigators had no reason to connect them, and for a long time, they didn't. What follows is not a story of an arrest, a trial, or a conviction. It's the story of how answers arrive decades late and what happens when evidence outlives the person it was meant to confront. This is Evidence Room. In the early 1980s, Toronto was a growing city. Public transit was expanding, neighborhoods were changing, and criminal investigations relied on witness statements, physical evidence, and tips from the public. DNA profiling, as we know it today, did not yet exist. When serious crimes occurred, evidence was collected and preserved, often without knowing whether it would ever be useful again. In many cases, investigators did everything they could with the tools they had, and then waited. That waiting would stretch into decades. On June 21, 1982, Christine Prince, 25 years old, was last seen in Toronto. Police say she had been riding a streetcar along St. Clair Avenue West. The following day, her body was found in the Rouge River. According to police statements, Christine had been sexually assaulted and struck on the head. Her cause of death was ruled drowning. Investigators collected evidence, but no suspect was identified, and the case eventually went cold. Just over a year later, another young woman disappeared. Claire Sampson, 23 years old, was last seen in the early hours of September 1st, 1983, near the intersection of Jarvis and Gerrard Streets in downtown Toronto. The next day, her body was discovered in Oro-Medonte Township, north of the city. Police said she had been shot. The circumstances were different. The location was different. And at the time, investigators saw no clear connection to the earlier case. Once again, evidence was collected. Once again, there was no arrest. 14 years passed. In 1997, a third woman was found dead. Gracelyn Greenidge, 41 years old, was discovered in her apartment on Driftwood Avenue in Toronto after a co-worker became concerned when she didn't report to work. Police said she died from blunt force trauma. This case, like the others, was investigated on its own. There was no public indication that it might be connected to murders from the 1980s.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, I am joined by OPP Chief Superintendent Karen Gonneau and Detective Sergeant Steve Smith of our Homicide and Missing Person Cold Case section. Together, we are announcing a significant development in three long-standing homicide investigations. On December the 3rd, 2025, the Center of Forensic Sciences identified a man named Kenneth Smith as the offender in the murders of three women: Christine Prince in 1982, Claire Sampson in 1983, and Gracelyn in 1997. Kenneth Smith died in 2019 at the age of 72 years old in Windsor, Ontario. If he were alive today, the Toronto Police Service would arrest Kenneth Smith for the homicides of Christine Prince and Gracelyn Greenidge, and the OPP would arrest him for the homicide of Claire Sampson. His death means he will never be held to account in a court of law, and we recognize the impact that has on families who have waited so long for justice. On behalf of the Toronto Police Service and the OPP, I want to again extend our deepest condolences to their loved ones, who have carried an unimaginable burden for decades. While Chief Superintendent Gonneau and Detective Sergeant Smith will speak about Claire Sampson and Gracelyn Greenidge and more about the investigative work, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the first victim, Christine Prince. Christine was a 25-year-old woman from Wales living in Toronto and working as a nanny. On June the 21st, 1982, she was the last seen riding a streetcar along St. Clair Avenue West after a night out with friends that included visiting a coffee shop and seeing a movie. The next day, her body was found in the Rouge River. For Christine's family and for the families of Claire and Gracelyn, the wait for answers has been extraordinarily long. It is only through sustained collaboration and advances in forensic science that we have arrived at this moment. Before I turn it over to Chief Superintendent Gonneau, I want to thank the many people who made this breakthrough possible. Our investigators, past and present, the dedicated members of the Center of Forensic Sciences and the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, and of course our partners at the OPP. Their determination over so many years reflects what it truly means to serve victims and their families. These women were never forgotten, and it is because of the commitment of so many that we are able to give their loved ones at least one crucial answer today.
By the end of the 1990s, 3 women had been killed. 3 investigations had run out of leads, and the cases sat quietly in police files. What investigators could not have known at the time was how important preserved evidence would eventually become. DNA samples collected decades earlier remained stored. For years, they could not identify a suspect, but technology continued to advance. In 2016, police re-examined DNA evidence from the Prince and Sampson cases. According to investigators, the profiles matched. The DNA belonged to the same unknown male. For the first time, the cases were officially linked. A year later, in 2017, forensic analysis determined that the same DNA profile was also present in the Greenwich case. 3 murders, 1 unidentified offender. Still, there was no name. Identifying a DNA profile is not the same as identifying a person. Without a match in the national DNA database, the offender remained anonymous. Years passed. In 2022, Toronto police engaged external forensic specialists to apply genetic genealogy techniques. This process involves building family trees using genetic data, where legally permitted, and narrowing possibilities through confirmed relationships. It is slow work, and it requires careful verification at every step. By 2025, investigators say they had identified relatives connected to the unknown DNA profile. The search narrowed. On December 3, 2025, the Center of Forensic Sciences made a conclusive identification. Police said the DNA belonged to Kenneth Smith. According to investigators, Smith had lived and worked in Toronto during the periods when the murders occurred. He was known to police and had a history of sexual assault. But Kenneth Smith had died in 2019, at the age of 72. There would be no arrest. There would be no trial. Police later stated that if Smith had been alive, he would have been charged in all 3 homicides. On December 11, 2025, Toronto police publicly announced the posthumous identification. They emphasized that the conclusion was based on forensic evidence, and they also acknowledged its limits. There would be no courtroom proceedings, no defense arguments, no cross-examination of the evidence. Investigators also stated that they believe there may be additional victims connected to Smith, though none have been publicly